Hello and welcome to another edition of the Comic Shop Show. I'm your host, Chris Brenneman, owner of Infinite Realities, comics, games, and more in Atlanta, Georgia. Christmas is officially behind us, and if you celebrate, I hope it was a good one for you and yours. I know it was for mine. For some unknown reason, I convinced my wife to let the boys have the BB guns they've been wanting these last few months. They've been using them for a week now, and all eyes remain successfully not put out, and neither kid has shot the other. You know, if that's not successful parenting, then brother, tell me what is. Here at the Comic Shop Show, we're rounding out 2025 with a very special creator, that being Stephanie Gladden. Stephanie has been on the scene since the 1990s, working with licensed properties like the Powerpuff Girls, The Simpsons, and Cartoon Network Block Party. She's worked in animation, and you've definitely seen her work on shows like Space Ghost Coast to Coast, The Patrick Star Show, and that juggernaut of kids programming, SpongeBob SquarePants. Stephanie stopped by the comic shop to talk about her storied career in comics, the highs and lows of working in animation, and the unique challenges she sees facing young, up-and-coming talents struggling to make it today. Enjoy. Is your studio just, is it filled with reference material? And
There's a lot of reference material, but, you know, my studio is part of another part of the house, and it's just, I need my own space is what I'm trying to say. It'll happen.
So how long have you been at it now? I first met you back in 1997 at Dragon Con here in Atlanta.
Right.
How long have you been doing the grind now?
Doing the grind?
Yeah,
like for comics, animation?
All of it,
which
art, professional art.
Professional art. Okay. Well, I got started in 1991 working on the Stone Mountain Laser Show.
Get out of here.
That's right. I actually animated on the laser show.
Okay, that's the most impressive thing.
Is it?
Well, you're from Georgia. Even if you're from
Well,
outside of Atlanta, the Stone Mountain Laser Show.
You know, it's funny how many people still miss it.
Yeah,
you
'cause
know,
they've
they're
replaced
doing
it with drones.
But you know, every so often you'll just have people who are like, "Oh, but I don't know. You know, the horses would come to life,
and they
and I
would
get to
ride
watch them
off."
run." And then, you know, you would have the whole big, you know, proud to be an American. at
Lee
the
Greenwood
end,
comes on.
Lee
I will say, I
Greenwood.
miss the laser show because at least the problematic would run off the mountain.
Yes.
How do you get a job animating a laser show? How does that happen?
You know, I actually got that through some mutual animators. I started interning at Crawford Design Effects in roughly around Midtown Atlanta. They did commercials. They did a lot of local commercial work. And I was working with local animators like David Strandquist and Clay
Okay.
Croker and Robert Pope. You know, Clay sadly passed away.
Tragically.
He was, you know, in case people don't know, he was the driving force between Space Ghost Coast to Coast, the voice of Zorak, the voice of Moltar.
He was an Adult Swim founding father.
He really was. He really was. And Dave Strandquist, and he's an animator who's still in town doing his thing. And Robert Pope, he's done a lot of work. He animates, but he does a lot of work for Creative Associates, the Peanuts group. He
Okay.
draws an awful lot of Charlie Brown and Peanuts, but he's also done a lot of Looney Tunes comics as well.
That sounds like a fun gig.
Yeah, he's a character too. He's a lot of fun to hang out with.
So how long did you do the animation for the laser show?
Well, I did that for about, probably anywhere from, I think it was roughly 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
I cannot quite remember. But while I was doing work for the laser show, I was, you know, looking for some more money. The laser show did not pay a lot.
Yeah, I imagine.
And no, it just
not
didn't
big
pay a lot.
bucks.
But, you know, it was just one of those things where I was like, yeah, this can't last forever. It's not sustainable. I need to find something else to do. And then I had a friend of mine, Stephen Butler, who appeared at, wasn't quite Dragon Con yet. You know, it was
The Atlanta Sci-Fi Convention.
the Atlanta Sci-Fi Comic Convention.
Yeah.
And he was out there, and I was just chatting with him, talking about the old days. He lived in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. That's where I was raised. I was
Okay.
born in Georgia, but my family moved to Mississippi a couple of years after that.
How long were we in Mississippi?
Oh, I left for art school. I went to the Atlanta College of Art. I left when I was just shy of 18
Okay.
for art school.
And been here ever since.
I've been here ever since in the Atlanta area. But I met Steven, and he, you know, I showed him my sketchbook at the time, which was just full of ridiculous drawings, funny drawings. mostly funny animal stuff, but just cartoonist type of things. And there was a fellow next to him, and I wish I could remember his name because he really helped me out. He was inking Tiny Toons, but he needed to get out of it. He needed to find someone who could kind of replace him.
All right.
And so he recommended me because he was kind of using me as a way. If I can find my replacement, I can leave and maybe actually draw and ink superhero stuff, which is what he wanted to do. So he highly recommended me to, I wish I could remember her name. Gosh, it's been so many years. My editor at the time, she used to handle Tiny Toons comics for the international market. So I was drawing Tiny Toons for Italian comics for a while. And then I later went on to Looney Tunes domestic.
So how long did you do that?
I did that on and off for, I was probably drawing Tiny Toons for about a year or two. And then I graduated to Looney Tunes.
How hands-on is Warner for stuff like that at the time?
At the time, they gave you style guides, and they were just like, draw them like this, please. And, that's what we would do.
So there's like no room for interpretation or putting your own spin on it. It's
yes and no. It was so funny. It was one of those things where some artists caught a break and others didn't. Others were more strongly looked at. Like, Dave Alvarez, who's a highly talented cartoonist, did a lot of Looney Tunes stuff. He pretty much could draw, and no one gave him any notes, or very few notes, maybe. He could probably turn around if he heard this interview and say, no, people gave me plenty of notes. What are you talking about?
Pull them out of the file cabinet.
Yeah, he could probably say, look at all these notes I got. But, he drew very, very, people just loved his work. But, people like my work as well, and I drew a lot of Looney Tunes. But, it was like the more I would build up, my portfolio of that, I would just look around for other things.
Right.
So I was drawing Ren and Stimpy comics for Marvel back in the 90s. When Ren and Stimpy was still doing its thing, they needed some, cartoonists, and I got in on that, which was a lot of fun. I love drawing Ren and Stimpy a lot.
Yes.
And Dark Horse, I drew for Tex Avery Comics and Stories, and that they had going on. And that was actually neat because I sent them my portfolio and a letter, and they sent me a letter back, and it was this form letter. And it was just like, well, we don't have anything currently, but we have put your name on file if a job comes up that we think you might be good for. And I thought, what a polite way of saying no.
Yeah, that's a pretty rejection letter.
What a sweet,
very polite.
What a polite rejection letter. But here's the thing, they meant it, because when the Tex Avery comics came up, they called me and said, okay, we have a project we think you might be good for. And I thought, oh, they're good to their word. Thank you, Dark Horse.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Oh, I know. That was really fun. So, and that was a lot of fun to draw because I love Tex Avery cartoons.
Yeah. So when you were growing up, what kind of cartoons you're watching? Like Looney Tunes, Tex Avery?
The usual
Chuck
Looney
Jones.
Tunes, Tex Avery, Tom and Jerry. Sometimes the old Hanna-Barbera one would come on. Like the Flintstones and the Jetsons. I watched that. I mean, and I also watched. I'm old enough that I was watching Saturday morning, cartoons when they were on, and I would.
A bygone age.
A bygone age, boy. That was the days. It was just like when you were a kid. Those first 4 hours of TV were years and years alone.
And then the local news comes up, and now it's back to being the grown-ups' time.
Well, and I don't know what the syndication was in Georgia. I can tell you in Mississippi, you knew it was over because it was like, American Bandstand's coming on, or Soul Train is coming on.
I grew up in Macon. You knew Saturday morning cartoons were over when Soul Train comes on.
So it was like, well, which dances do I want to learn? You had two choices. So that's what I remember.
So when you're I'm a kid and I'm watching cartoons like that too. I'm enjoying them. Were you that kid that's like studying them and how do they do this?
But I'll be honest, what I really wanted to do as a kid, I wanted to be a comic strip artist. I wanted to do comic strips for the newspapers.
Yeah, what comic strips were speaking to you?
Peanuts, without a doubt. I mean, I was obsessed with Peanuts, but BC by Johnny Hart, I thought he was an amazing draftsman. My dad used to go and buy those cheap paperbacks, like the Fawcett and Penguin paperbacks. And, they were everywhere.
They were everywhere.
You could go to drugstores. You could go, not just bookstores, you could go to drugstores and airports and bus terminals. And, near the magazine rack, you would see this little rack.
Like that BC, Heathcliff, Garfield Family Circus.
Yeah. So my dad was buying them all. He was buying, like, Hagar the Horrible. He was buying Wizard of Id. He was buying the BCs. He was buying all that stuff. And he was buying Peanuts especially for me because I was really obsessed with it. But Beetle Bailey, like Mort Walker's Beetle Bailey. So I was getting obsessed and really looking at all those things. And, you know, my brother, I have an older brother, my older brother Jay, he was getting Mad magazine. So sometimes I would try to sneak into his room and like grab those and study those as
That's really
well.
cool.
And for a while, my brother also collected trade paperbacks of Mad collections. And that was really fascinating to me. Like, you know, collection, like they would just these cheap faucet paperbacks and, you know, you would see Mad from the 50s and 60s, and I'd be like, oh, why is that so different? So I was just obsessed with all sorts of cartooning. But what I really wanted to do was newspaper strips, because then I got obsessed with that. Then Garfield came out, and I thought that was interesting. But then I was just at the right snotty age when Burt Breath's Bloom County came out.
Oh,
and
wow.
I got obsessed with Bloom County for a while. And then on the tail end of that, you know, I was a little older, you know, Calvin and Hobbes came.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, wow, you know, he's really turning comics around. Maybe how people view newspaper comics could change. But then the internet came along and it changed everything. And basically, I remember once before the internet came, Burt Breathen was doing an interview and saying, oh, being a comic strip artist was like being a buggy whip maker. And yeah, that's what happened to it. It really did. It became an occupation that just sort of does, you know, there's plenty of comic strip artists still out there, but it's not what it was.
Which again is a bummer, because like Saturday morning cartoons as a kid, it was fun going straight for the funny pages, right? You remember that? Right.
Of
Especially
course.
Sunday.
Especially Sunday. I was just obsessed with them. I was obsessed with all of them. That was another thing my dad bought, you know, in the 70s. He bought that giant Smithsonian collection of newspaper strips.
Oh, wow.
So then I was looking at like the history of it, like when it started with the Yellow Kid and the Katzenjammer Kids,
wow.
and, you know, the strips from the turn of the century. I was looking at some of those.
And those are beautiful.
And they're gorgeous.
Works of art.
And I was never a big fan of Popeye as a kid.
Really?
And yeah, because, well, we did not have Popeye syndicated anywhere where I was. So when I finally saw Popeye, I only saw the Paramount cartoons. I never saw the Fleischer ones.
Gotcha.
So I wasn't impressed.
Different animal.
Yeah. But then when my dad got the Smithsonian book, I finally read a Seagar story from start to finish of Popeye. And I thought, this is the most amazing thing I've ever read. My appreciation. I was probably the only kid I knew at the time who actually really loved the Popeye movie when it came out.
I love that movie. I will defend that movie
because it
all
totally
day.
felt like the cigar strips to
And
me.
that's why I defend that movie. It is so faithful. I got those giant cigar reprints they came out with years and years ago, and yeah, like I like them because they're gritty.
Yeah,
like, it's not safe.
The movie feels kind of dingy and, you know, salty and
dangerous,
and yet they still incorporate, you know, some Fleischerism in it. You know, Robin Williams mumbles kind of everyone kind of is mumbling through the whole thing, which is a delight, in my opinion, because it does sort of feel like Cigar meets Fleischer. And so I really love the movie, even though everyone else was like, oh, this movie's terrible. And I was like, that's because you've never read the strip. If you would just read the
defender.
Yeah, if you would just read the strips, you would understand.
During COVID, we were doing a movie club, and Popeye was one of them, and everybody was like, oh, I don't like it. And I was the same way. I was like, well, that's because you've never read the Cigar strips. You plebes.
That's right, you hoi polloi.
So were you making your own comic strips as a kid?
Oh, yeah. I was making them all the time, and they were just terrible ripoffs of whatever I was into at the
absolutely.
time. You know, they were just, you know, just ripoffs left and right. And that's what I did, you know, like most. And then I would just imitate them. You know, I'd try to draw my own Peanut strips, my own bad BC strips, that sort of thing. And I think that's how you learn, though.
Absolutely. My 11-year-old, he makes his own comic strips.
Yeah.
He loved Milk and Cheese. He found my copy of Dorkin's Milk and Cheese, and so now he has Hamburger and Hot Dog. and they're funny, but he's teaching himself how to set up, to do setups and to do the punchline. He's doing it. So he's learning whether he realizes it or not.
Oh, exactly. That's how you learn.
Yeah.
You just, whatever you love, that's why I don't give people too much of a hard time when they're just, emulating what they love. It's
Yeah.
like, well, of course you are. You're trying to figure out your own voice that way too.
So were you telling people that you wanted to be a cartoonist?
Oh, sure.
What did mom and dad say about this?
Well, mom and dad were always pretty supportive of it. I'll be honest. I think they were hoping I would sort of veer more into children's books, something maybe a bit more respectable, in their eyes and in the eyes of other people, and because I think that to them was like, oh, I can understand that, someone illustrating, children's books. And so they were trying to not push me more into that, but I think they were hoping I would go that direction. And to be honest, I have done some children's books, mostly for licensed properties, like Pepper Ann, I did some things, and Powerpuff Girls, I did, some children's books. And there's a lot to be said for children's books. I also read a lot of children's books as well as comics as a kid. That's just a difficult market. Or at the time, I thought that was a difficult market. I mean,
I think it still is.
I think it still is. I was taught by some children's book illustrators, and that's just that's tough. That's a lot of work. Comic artists who do conventions. I mean, if you get into children's books, you're going to schools all the time. You're talking to some of the toughest audiences there are, which is kids who are more than happy. They don't have that, oh, I must be polite filter. That goes away.
They're sociopaths.
They will be more or less like, why did you draw it like that? And why this and this and this? And, they must, I always say children's book, they must have just nerves of steel. Children's books illustrators,
they're
going to
for
schools
punishment
all the time. But, if you can break it into that, that's good.
Well, doing the licensed properties you do you, I mean, you've had to have interacted with kids before, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've interacted with kids,
Are they generally kind?
They can be some of the toughest art directors you've ever seen. There's nothing quite like drawing for a child, really, because they have opinions. They will give them to you. It depends on the kid, too, though.
Yeah.
Obviously.
So when do you start? So you're doing some comic work. You start doing the licensed stuff.
Right.
When do you cross over from cartooning and comics? When do you cross over into animation?
Well, I always did a little bit of animation locally. I was always working at various studios in town. I worked for Turner Studios, Primal Screen, like I said, Crawford Design Effects.
Yep.
When Cartoon Network finally was gearing up in Atlanta, and this probably would have been late 90s, early 2000s, they needed animation to put their bumpers on the air and little ads and promotionals. So they needed animators. And I was doing that, but I got out of animation for a little while. The actual process, while I love it, you have to have a special mind for it, I think, like for actual animation. There's a lot of timing that you have to pay attention to. It's a certain mindset, and I noticed I just did not quite have the patience for it.
Okay.
I like doing storyboards, that I liked. Character design especially. I really love doing character design, and I'd still be used for that. So I was working at Turner Studios for a while doing that sort of thing, animating. And then a job came up for a staff illustrator in the licensing department and marketing departments. And so I applied there, and I was able to get in doing that and doing style guides. And the best way to describe what I did is I didn't work on the shows, no, but I still worked with the creators of Cartoon Network shows. And for example, like Powerpuff Girls, if you see a Powerpuff Girls t-shirt out there, odds are pretty good I might have drawn it.
Get out.
That's right.
Because you did the style guide.
Because I did the style guide, yeah. Like, sometimes I will go to Five Below, the store, and I will be stunned stupid because sometimes I will see art that I drew just 20-something years ago and of Powerpuff Girls. And it's like, oh, my God.
Blast from the past.
Yeah, I remember that style guide, and there it is. It's come back to haunt me. There it is.
When you do a style guide, do you get royalties from that, or is it
Sadly,
just,
no.
Yeah.
You're working for a big company, and you just have to hope that as long as you do a good job, they honor their side of the bargain and keep you drawing and keep them busy.
Well, if they're still putting on T-shirts, I feel like they're happy with the work, right?
You would think so. You would think so. But it was interesting. It was interesting, and I did that for a long time. But on the side, I would still draw comics, and I did a lot of comics for Cartoon Network, Block Party at the time for DC.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, I was working on a lot of Powerpuff Girls, Chowder. I did some Chowder. Sometimes Billy and Mandy, not all that often, but I did some Billy and Mandy. I was usually the Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah.
You know, hey, we need more Powerpuff Girls. Come on in and do this. But then I'd started drawing some Chowder as well.
Powerpuff Girls, that hit like a
Oh,
nuclear
yeah.
bomb. That was
that
everywhere.
that was an amazing show.
Mm-hmm.
That was an amazing show, and that was I can tell you, when that show was focus grouped, they first showed it to a group of like boys ages like 8 to 12, and they all said that whoever made this show should be fired. And I think the creator, Craig McCracken, actually was in on that focus group and was horrified. But here's the interesting thing. One of the heads at Cartoon Network, and it may have been Linda Saminsky, I'm not sure, but I always heard the rumor that she was like, interview the boys separately without their peers and see what they say. And it was totally different. Their opinion of the show changed dramatically, in which they were like, no, it's actually cool and violent and funny and this. In a group, the boys would never admit to liking a show with girl protagonists. Separately, though, it was a different story.
The 90s were the worst. It's so different now. I feel like it'd be a little bit different now.
How so?
Well, I mean, I'm the father of 2 boys, and I've noticed like with them and their friends, there's not so much of the that's for boys, that's for girls.
Well, it was a different time.
Yes, I'm saying like it was different. When we were kids,
you
didn't cross over.
Well, not only that, it was even worse. At that time, there was the theory that girls would just watch whatever was on the air. You had to make it for boys, and girls will just go along with it.
That's gross.
That's really how it was promoted for a long time. Like if you had a show with female protagonists, it was just like, well, we can't risk that. We have to make boys like it, and then girls will just fall in line. And that's how a lot of shows were at Cartoon Network in the early 2000s. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was just like, yeah. So the Powerpuff Girls, that was a real outlier.
That's fat. When did it start changing? Did Powerpuff Girls kind of start to change that, or?
Yes and no. People, unfortunately, if you've tried to present Powerpuff Girls as like, hey, here's proof positive that...
Yeah, we've done science.
We've done this. This is a successful show. It would be like, oh, that was just a fluke. We'll still stick with our science that says, we got to make it for boys, and just stick maybe a girl character in there, and that'll maybe make them watch it. They'll just watch whatever. I would say that shift probably occurred maybe in the 2010s.
Okay.
When you start seeing people now saying, well, maybe that's not really the case. I mean, I think Adventure Time maybe started changing some of that. Steven Universe certainly
for sure
started changing that notion that, make it for boys and girls will follow. It's interesting. I did have a show that was nearly picked up by Cartoon Network.
Really? What was that?
At the time, the pitch was called Monster Paradise.
Okay.
For a brief while, I made a webcomic out of it called Girls of Monster Paradise.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an idea where it's an island in the middle of nowhere, and on this island are the girls, and they're in this weird age where it's like, I used to jokingly say, they're the same age as the Scooby-Doo gang, so go figure.
Yeah.
And monsters. And they live on this island with monsters, and the girls love it, and they do everything in their power to not be rescued and taken from the island. It's like Gilligan's Island in reverse.
In reverse.
Yes. So basically, these girls are doing everything they can they're living their best lives on this island. They're doing whatever they want to do. They're having fun. They're exploring their own interests. Like one is a car mechanic. That's all she does. One is just this surfer musician girl. This other one, she's sort of a peacenik.
Oh, wow.
And then there's this another girl, Miko. She sort of is she's sort of a de facto protector of the island. She's the only one who can call up the kaiju that protects the island.
Okay.
And she will do it depending on her mood. She's very moody, as it were.
What kind of threats come to the island?
Well, monster hunters, people who want to just develop
No.
it, people who just wander around and
Society.
society. Society is the people. I always used to describe it as Gilligan's Island in reverse. They were like, we've got to get off the island. And these girls are like, we want to stay, keep away. And I did pitch the show. Sadly, it just, because I worked at Cartoon Network at the time, they just did not want to give me full rights and full protection.
It came down to that.
It came down to like just creator credit,
Yeah.
and they just did not want to. I would have been risking too much, and so I had to rescind.
How long ago was that?
And that would have been in 2005.
Any chance of revisiting that in 2025?
I don't know. That's an excellent question. I would hope so. I've certainly pitched it around to a few places.
Okay.
And even Amazon showed minor interest at the time, but they were like, well, this doesn't quite fit what we're thinking of. But if you ever come up with any more ideas, let us know.
And you got any more?
Just a few, but I haven't been pursuing streaming. I'm sort of waiting to see what happens with streaming.
Right? I think everybody's waiting to see what happens with
Well, you
streaming.
had this big explosion during the pandemic because animation was the only thing that could be freshly produced. But then they overhired, so then and then after it went away, people were suddenly let go. You just have a lot of people in LA and other animation hubs that are just not working right now because of that extreme boom and bust. It was like so quick.
How do you survive the feast or famine times then?
Well, that's a good question. I really don't know. I always say in my case, well, I've had a lot of luck. And I know a lot of artists don't like to talk about luck.
Look, it is what it is.
It is what it is. This is what I always say. This is my opinion, and this is my opinion only. Luck gets you the job, but the talent and hard work lets you keep it.
Right.
So talent and hard work are, they're not for naught. Obviously, you need those things in order to keep working. But there's a lot of luck. Sometimes being an artist feels like playing the lottery. It's like the more time, you have to keep playing. The more you play, the more your odds are you'll win. And so you have to keep looking, for opportunity. But once it comes, you really have to take it. And it's just knowing when it's there. And I've been very fortunate. But there's been times it's been hard, and I have struggled. I have struggled looking for work.
Have you had those moments where you've flirted with the idea of walking away?
I've never had a plan B, so they were never very serious, unfortunately. I should have always had a plan B.
No, it sounds like it served you well so far.
I don't know. My dad went to law school, and me and my brother were still, in school ourselves. And it was interesting. Sometimes I think back on it, and I'm just like, I guess if I ever had to have done something practical, I probably would have gotten into copyright and trademark law.
Okay.
Because honestly, when you really look at the law, it has less about learning the law and more about learning the language of the law.
It's a language art.
It really is. I would have my dad, and I'd try to say, well, what does this even mean? And he would basically explain it to me in very simplistic terms. And that's really all lawyers are. They're translators of the law.
100%. Every time I have a contract to do for the shop, I have a lawyer. And I'm like, what is this paragraph saying? Like, oh, that basically just says you have to pay the bill on the third of the month.
It's frustrating as a human, as a non-lawyer. You're just sort of like, well, why can't it just say that?
Just say it.
Just say it. Why do you have to disguise it in, this medieval language? But that's how it is.
Now, you're on SpongeBob right now still, correct?
Yes, I'm still working as a character designer on SpongeBob.
How long have you been there? Since season 12, 13?
Probably season 13.
Okay.
I actually got my start on the Pat Show, the Patrick Star Show.
Okay.
And I guess someone liked my work, and they decided, just shift her over to SpongeBob. So I went over there.
Is it a fun environment? Is it?
Well, it's hard for me to say because I work from home.
Sure.
So that's different. But the people are really good. They're fun. It's Nickelodeon is a fun place, and it is a fun show still. SpongeBob is still it's just a classic tradition.
Yeah.
We just want to be funny, here. It's very good at that.
So how does character design work? The writer writes a script or they
Mm-hmm.
storyboard and say, "Hey, Stephanie, we want
Yeah.
SpongeBob to meet this character."
Yeah. Sometimes it's very interesting. My job is more like a plusser. Now, in animation, what that means is that's an old Disney term. That is to say, whoever you give this to, this next person has to plus it up. It's
Okay.
like going down the line, it has to get plussed up. So when it comes to me, what happens is my director usually breaks down what the character design. Some of them will be what we call redresses. In short, being SpongeBob's fashion designer or putting dresses on
Okay,
fish,
yeah.
changing clothes on fish. There's a lot of that where you reuse characters and then you just,
Different shirt today.
different shirt today. But then, yes, sometimes there's drawing special poses from the board where they're just like, okay, we love this drawing of SpongeBob, but can you kind of tighten them up to make sure that Rough Draft Korea, the animators in Rough Draft Korea, know how it should look? Because we're not quite sure they would know how to decipher this. So there's a lot of that. And yeah, sometimes there's just fresh character design
Okay.
to do. So it really depends on what my director wants from me.
So, like, what's the workload on that? Is it just depending on the episode?
It depends on the episode. I can get anywhere from like a small number, like 4 designs, to nearly 20 designs a week.
Yeah.
But it's weekly. I have, it comes almost every week, or maybe every 2. But, I probably get a handout anywhere from every week to every 10 days
That's pretty
during a
consistent.
season.
Yeah.
It's very, very consistent. And it's very demanding because the deadlines really are a week.
So, are you on staff or are you still freelance with that?
They affectionately call me a permalancer, where I'm considered staff, but because I live out of state, I have
Gotcha.
to be a freelancer.
Gotcha.
Because otherwise, I think what that happened is when they offered that to me, they realized they could not really offer me a staffer job because what could they offer? I'm older. I own a house, here in town.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, drop whatever you're doing and move to LA and where everything's on fire and you can live in you can live in a 1-bedroom apartment maybe with you and your husband and your dog. Give up your house here in Atlanta. And it's
No, they're really selling it.
yeah, it's like, no, I think I'll just, stay here. So, no, I think they were aware that it would be a hard sell to convince me to go out to LA if I had wanted to. Although, there's a lot of great things about LA, though.
Oh, LA's a cool town.
It really, really is. And Burbank is a nice place.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a shame that Southern California has become so unaffordable for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
It really is sad that has happened. But I do. It does make me sad when I see artists. It does feel like young artists are struggling so much more than I feel I did. I talk about luck, but when I got into the business, there were so many more revenues, for cartoonists and illustrators. You need you need a menu done? Sure, you can work, or you could work in a T-shirt shop, and literally draw stuff for T-shirts. And don't worry, there's also, besides kids' books and besides comic books, there's always storyboard work, but there's also paperbacks and magazines and newspaper illustrators and editorial cartooning. And, it just always seemed like there was a revenue for somewhere for someone to just be drawing some stuff.
Yeah, to get paid to be an artist.
Yeah, to be paid to be an artist. And now it seems like a lot of those revenues have dried up. And, now with the advent of AI and, it seems to be harder for younger artists. Although, to be honest, I really don't know where AI will go.
It's hard to tell. On the one hand, people are saying gloom and doom. On the other side, you'll read articles about how, well, no, it's overinflated. All I do know is that we do get people in the shop bringing their self-published comic that uses AI art, and that's disheartening.
Well, the funny thing is I've seen some AI, and it's mostly slop. Let's face it.
It's
a
AI
lot
slop.
of it is AI slop. But occasionally I will see something and I think to myself, I think this is an artist who is trying to figure it out, to make it work. On YouTube, there's a little series that I sort of enjoy called The Strangest Flea Market.
Okay.
And whoever's in charge, who's ever doing it, first off, they're very honest about all the AI and all the programs they're using to make it. They're very upfront about about it. And then it sort of feels like they are trying really hard to make it work, like to work the way it should.
And how is that?
Well, here's an excellent way. They don't want like features melting on characters or the movement's not working or like the character changes its actual consistency from frame to frame, which is something AI just has a real difficult time doing. It feels like there's an artist behind the prompts, someone who's really working hard to say no, it needs to do this.
Okay.
So when I see that, sometimes I'm like, now wouldn't that be an irony that, so many money people are like, ooh, boy, we get to use AI and now we get to replace all these pesky artists. And then all of a sudden they discover the only ones who can make this work are artists.
Are the artists.
They're the only ones who can actually, and that makes perfect sense because artists would know composition, artists would know character design, artists would know the storytelling. Artists would know the best angle. What's the best angle for this? What's the best angle for that? Artists are the ones who would know that, not necessarily the AI.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody address that. Yeah.
So I don't know. I can't predict anything. I have no crystal ball. I don't know if this will be, because no one could predict what the internet would do. You know, when the internet came out, I was told, this is going to make us all rich. We're going to all be rich. You'll be a rich artist. Everyone's going to be a rich artist. Woo, we'll all be rich. Well, no, some artists do very well through the internet, to be sure. And then others, very talented ones, they just never make it.
Yeah.
And there's no rhyme or reason for it. I mean, people could say, oh, it's the algorithm. But algorithms are strange, too.
That's just also a catch-all term, right? I don't understand how this is happening, so the algorithm.
That's the algorithm. It's the algorithm that is why your strip is never being seen.
Yeah.
But hey, if we'll boost it, though, if you are willing to do this or that.
Yeah, give me X amount of dollars, and I will
X
game the algorithm
I'll game the algorithm for you. Sure, But so no one could predict at the time how much the internet would change everything. I mean, so that's how I feel about AI. We just don't know what it's going to do.
So you're taking a wait and see. We're not going to gloom and doom it. We're just going to see how this plays out.
Oh, I mean, sure, it could definitely go to, I have no mouth, but I'm a scream.
Sure. That's what I'm terrified.
It could definitely go into that territory, or a show I actually love that addresses it, The Amazing Digital Circus. It could go there too, perhaps.
Oh, I sometimes will use ChatGPT for very basic things, and I say please and thank you every time in case there's machine overlords.
Yeah, thank you. Thank our machine overlords.
Like, oh, Chris was polite. He said please and thank you.
Please and thank you. I mean, we don't know. We don't know if it's going to be Skynet. We have no idea yet. We'll just have to wait and see.
So, what kind of technology are you using? Do you work digitally? Are you still doing pen and paper?
Oh my goodness, I'm half and half. I'm still terribly analog. I can work on a Cintiq, if I have to.
Okay.
But I'll be honest, I work better if I just draw on paper from the start. At least with my rough drawings, I have to work it out on paper.
Yeah. Is that just preference? Is just
honestly, not only is it preference,
muscle memory?
I think so. I think it's some part of that. I think it's just it works better for me. It feels better for me. And, I mean, I could do a rough in the Cintiq, and yet I've never been satisfied with any rough I've drawn in a Cintiq. Always happy on a Post-it note.
Yeah. Oh, Post-it note. We're not even doing a sketchbook, just a Post-it note.
Oh, random envelopes,
Cocktail
cocktail napkin, one of those to-do list things on the kitchen, pop one of those off and draw on it, sure. I do that all the time, notebooks.
So
Even line notebooks, I'll just start sketching something real quick.
are you always doodling, always drawing, and always sketching?
Not as much as I used to. I used to always be a doodler, but every so often, if I can find a menu that on the back is clean, yeah, I'll draw on it.
Oh, nice. What's your go-to?
Hmm?
You have a go-to sketch you do, or you do characters? Do you just
Well,
do?
I like rabbits. I always love
I've
drawing
noticed, yeah.
rabbits. I'm very fond. I don't know why. I just always love rabbits.
Because they're cute.
Well, they are cute, and they're an immediate recognizable animal.
Yeah.
As soon as you see it, it's not like, is that a dog? Is that a cat? Is that a fox? Rabbit, rabbit.
Yep.
It's the ears.
Look at the ears.
It's the ears. So you always go with rabbit. I mean, Matt Groening knew that. Another person I worked for back in the day.
Yeah, I've told you this personally, but I'll say it here.
Yeah.
I got a Homer Simpson sketch from you way back in 1997. I think that was the first piece of original art I ever got, in fact. Was a Homer Simpson, and he's daydreaming about a frosted donut.
A frosted donut. Oh, gosh. Yeah, that was one of the ones I drew. Yeah, I drew Simpsons comics for probably about 5.5 years.
Yeah,
and in fact, they published my own comics for a brief while, about 2 issues of Hopster's Tracks.
Okay, so Bongo did that.
Yeah. It was a funny animal comic.
Yeah.
And they did 2 issues of it. They were trying to get more into that. They did Hopster's Tracks, but then they also did like Bill Morrison's Roswell, when he published with him a little bit. So there was a while there, it looked like Bongo was going to try to do that more, like lean into, like a Dark Horse situation.
Right. Like expand out a little bit from licensed.
But, I guess it's hard. It's hard to promote something no one's ever seen.
It makes me sad that Bongo went away.
It does me too. I wonder why it happened. I wonder if it has something to do with the Disney deal. Also, because Matt, when he signed the deal with Fox, when Matt Groening signed that deal, he signed a deal where he retained all publishing rights on The Simpsons and Futurama. Anything he drew, he retained it. Now, because at the time they thought, this show's probably only going to last 1 season, 2 maybe. Who cares?
He George Lucas'd that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he owned, when he did Bongo, that all went to him and that company. Yeah. So, but being a publisher, as any publisher would tell you, that's a hard job. It's hard work. And I do wonder if maybe when Disney appropriated Fox, if it was just, look, you can't have that anymore. I don't know. I don't know the details. I can only speculate.
What was it like being part of the Simpsons family?
That was fun too. Matt Groening is a sweetheart.
I've heard nothing but good things.
One of, if ever there was someone who deserved his success, Matt Groening and Charles Schultz too. I always heard I met him too. He's a wonderful.
Oh,
he's a
no
wonderful
kidding.
Man. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I met him in Pasadena at a National Cartoonist Society meeting, and very charming man, very very kind.
And you said Matt's a cool dude too.
Oh, Matt's great. Matt's great. He seems to remember everyone who's ever worked for him, and I don't know how he does it because I can barely remember names.
Yeah. Was so compared to working for someone like Warner Cartoon Network?
I'll be honest, it was hard working for The Simpsons. It was very exacting, and it did affect my drawing. That was another reason I sort of backed away. You're probably not familiar with him. He used to work with Spumco on Ren and Stimpy. Brilliant, talented cartoonist Jim Smith. Very talented animator, very talented cartoonist, very funny. I saw him at a convention and he looked at my art and he says, "So what have you been drawing lately?" And I said, "The Simpsons." And he goes, yeah, your drawings are starting to, there's a lot of symmetry here, a lot of stiffness. You may start needing to back away.
And so that was the canary in the coal mine for
that. That was sort of like, yeah, he's probably right. It is probably time for me to get a little bit away and start expanding.
Was that hard to walk away from?
Yes and no. It was difficult. It was a little difficult. The money was very good. They always had a great page rate at Bongo, to be honest. I mean, thanks to Bongo, I was able to put a down payment on a house.
That is okay.
Yeah.
Go Bongo.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's another thing that makes me sad for younger cartoonists is the page rates,
which I hear are really bad now.
They are. I mean, sometimes when I hear how much artists are working for, I'm just like, how? How can you live off that? And comics are hard work. out of all the art I've ever done, besides probably animating,
Mm-hmm.
comics might have been some of the toughest work I ever did.
Really?
Yeah, because you're doing everything. You are figuring out the storytelling. You are figuring out the character design. You are figuring out you are figuring out the backgrounds. And then on top of that, you have to figure out the design of the thing because, don't forget, you have to put your balloons and sound effects everywhere and all this. So you can't take full advantage of your panels. It's an incredibly, incredibly difficult art form. I mean, it's rewarding. When you finally see that final product, it's always very, very rewarding. But it is way more difficult than people think.
Yeah, like how long does it take you on average to do a page?
Well, when I was doing comics, it would depend. The Simpsons, that was a lot of work because it was so exacting. And when I would get the scripts, some of those scripts were involved. I mean, just everything in the kitchen sink sometimes in those scripts. So sometimes it was a bit of a relief also to leave when I went to Cartoon Network because the scripts that I would get for, like, say, when Abby Denson would give me a script, there was a lot more liberty in that. It was just like, okay, all right, I can kind of have more fun. I had more freedom to explore and, play around with the characters and the storytelling on that.
The folks writing the Simpsons comics, were these TV people or were they also people versed in comics?
It seemed to be mostly people versed in comics.
Okay.
They were mostly versed in comics, but they did seem to want to make it feel like the show as much as it could. And that's one of those situations. And as someone who's been on there both sides, what can I tell you? Animation is not comics, and comics are not animation.
How often have you had that conversation with writers and editors?
Oh, I would have it a lot, but that didn't mean they would listen.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I would just get these scripts and I'd be like, that's an animation script. That is not a comic script. You're asking for the entire town in a gag. And, what can I say? One of the last comic stories I did for The Simpsons, Smithers is cloned.
Oh, boy.
And the last end was like dozens and dozens of Smithers doing, a Broadway, show tune. And yeah, that was the sort of stuff you would get. And it would be like, okay, that feels more like an animation script than a comic script. Comics have a different vibe. And, and it's funny, you can translate comics to animation, but sometimes you have to have a very sensitive writer, I think, to translate it from animation to comics and realize that comics have to be respected for their art form for what they are. You can't just turn around and say, oh, just draw what you would do for animation and give it to a comic artist to do.
Yeah, because it's a comic, not a storyboard.
Yeah, exactly.
So, any comics you're working on now, or is it strictly animation for the moment?
For the time being, it's animation. Animation. On the side, I have been doing mascot design.
Oh, fun.
Oh, yeah. I just did some mascots recently for a client of mine who, this is for some college somewhere. I do that a lot.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, that's actually enjoyable to me. I find that a lot of fun. It's like, hey, we need a bulldog, and then you draw 20, you draw a dozen bulldogs, and then my client chooses 3 of those, and then he shows them to his client, and then you go from there. And it's really, actually, that was great fun. This particular fellow I work for, his name is Joe Bosak Company. We joked about that because I told him how one thing I have to do is when I draw, like, say, a bulldog, I can't draw it looking like it came out of the Preston Blair animation books.
Okay.
Because his bulldog is the most ripped-off bulldog of all time.
Yes.
He didn't even know that. So when I showed him imagery, he was like, oh, no, I can see that. I can tell you. He named me like 20 colleges right off the bat that were using the same bulldog from that book, from Preston Blair's, animation books. And I had to laugh, and I said, oh, yeah, pig, too. You'll see his pig in many front of a barbecue place, for sure, the pig he draws in it. So he just laughed and laughed. He thought that was hilarious because he says, I now realize how difficult your job is. Try not to rip off this artist.
I bet you do when you're working with clients like that because they come in with a preconceived notion of something they've seen.
Oh, yeah.
And they want that.
Oh, yeah. But, at the same time, they want something unique. They want something to call their own.
That's
So
cool.
it's like, well, we want a bulldog, but we can't look like their bulldog, and it can't look like this bulldog. We want it to be our bulldog. So you have to work very hard and giving them an original bulldog, which is which is harder than it sounds, but at the same time, it's very fun. It's so satisfying too.
You keep talking about, what new artists are facing.
Yeah.
Like, based on your career, like, what would you say some new artists looking to cross into either comics or animation? Like, what are some pitfalls that they could watch out for, or some concerns they can keep an eye out for?
Well, it's a tough business, and it is a business. That's one thing. Sometimes I joke about that too. If I had known how tough the business was, I don't know if I would have become an artist. I had no idea being an artist was so hard.
Yeah.
I thought you just, after a while, and I come from a very old school where it was like you build up your portfolio, and after a while, people just know you by name and they call you on their own. Well, that doesn't happen so much anymore. You do have to kind of keep out there. And I know that's easy for me to say because I barely have a footprint on the internet anymore. I mean, I'm not really on any social media, Yeah, you can find my portfolio through Adobe online, but that's about it.
That's it.
Yeah, I just don't really go out there too much, as much as I should. But, I think it's like anything else. It's just if you have to have a passion for it, and if you work hard and develop your talent and just work well with others. I had a teacher in art school who once said, in order to succeed in art, you had to be at least 2 of 3 things.
All right.
Good, fast, easy to work with. And if you were at least 2 of those things, you could probably have a job.
I feel like
You could
that
probably
applies
get
beyond
work.
art.
It probably applies to everything, really.
Yeah.
But they said it seemed to really apply to art. And if you had all 3 things, like, say, the golden trifecta, like, I don't know, a Jack Davis, perhaps, then you were gold.
Stephanie, I really appreciate you doing this with us.
Oh, of course. It was such a pleasure, and I'm so glad you could invite me today.
Look, amazing creator, amazing artist, but even more amazing human being.
Oh, well, that's
Just an
very
absolute
kind.
joy to be around. And
Well, anytime you want to chat some more and expand upon anything that
I-
wasn't talked about, just let me know.
I will hit you up. This is hopefully the first of many to come. Stephanie,
Okay.
thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Chris. Thank you.
Stephanie Gladden, ladies and gentlemen. Amazing creator, even more amazing human being, and I can't wait to have her back on the show. All right, if you like what you heard, then please do subscribe via your favorite podcast provider. If you want to learn more about our comic shop, Infinite Realities, here in the Atlanta area, then you can hit us up on Instagram. Our handle is @InfiniteRealitiesComics. You can check out our website, www.infiniterealitiescomics.com, or you can just come over and see us. We're here 7 days a week, and we love to hang. And that's it for this week's episode of The Comic Shop Show. Hope you have a happy new year, and we'll be back next Wednesday with another guest. So until then, be safe out there.